Hello and welcome to the Randomly Generated History Club, where three non-historians pick a year at random and try to learn things about it. I'm Will, and I'm here with my two friends, Ant and Anna.
Hi.
Bonjour.
This week we are talking about the year 1393, and I'd like each of us, please, to give our three-word preview of what we're discussing today. Ant.
Busy Bulgarian boys.
Busy Bulgarian boys. Makes sense to me.
That's the
Anna?
best kind of boy.
They're best kept busy.
The best kept busy in Bulgaria. My three words are, this party's lit.
This party's lit.
Lit.
And that's a modern slang expression
Yes,
for...
the youths say.
Okay, or is it just well illuminated?
I guess we'll see.
Excellent. And mine is annoyingly accomplished poet.
It's just the day when you read your autobiography.
Yeah.
On
Are
the
you
podcast.
jealous of this other poet?
There's no one on earth I'm more jealous of than another annoyingly accomplished poet. Okay, onwards. Oh shit, it's me. Right, okay. This week I'm going to talk about the English poet and author Geoffrey Chaucer.
Oh, I've heard of him.
You have?
Yeah?
Yep.
Excellent.
From the movie A Knight's Tale, starring Heath
Should I still go on?
Yeah, I think you should.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Chaucer is a hugely influential figure for the English language and English culture, and he's been called the father of English literature and the father of English poetry. He's called both those things.
And the uncle of English canoeing.
Very into
Little
canoeing.
known.
Yeah.
And as a measure of his influence, almost 2,000 English words are first seen in his manuscripts.
Wow.
And
Okay.
in alphabetical order, those words are. So he's a big deal, this guy, and he was also the first writer to be buried in what's now called Poets' Corner, which I think has come up on a previous
It
episode.
has come up in a previous
about
episode, and using
Westminster
my
Abbey.
memory brain to remember what that was, that is in the big churchy place in the middle of London,
That's right.
St.
And
Paul's.
that came up in our
Not St. Paul's, Westminster Abbey.
Westminster Abbey.
The other one.
1245 episode when you talked
Yeah.
about the construction of Westminster Abbey.
It's right.
And that's where they stick
right.
all the dead poets.
Society.
Society. It's where the society meets, yeah.
That's all correct. It's like all history. It's like it's all part of the same wonderful diorama.
Yeah, the same story.
Yeah,
It's like
we're
one-
just coloring in very slowly a map of the entire human experience.
But interestingly, beyond his writing, he was also famous at the time as a philosopher and astronomer, and composed the scientific work, a treatise on the astrolabe for his 10-year-old son, Lewis. And he was also a career...
I bet Lewis really appreciated that.
Wait,
Dad, I just wanted a football.
He wrote a book about how to do astronomy, basically, for his kid.
For his
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but agreed, probably the kid didn't read it.
Yeah.
And he was also a career civil servant and a bureaucrat and a royal courtier.
God.
He was a diplomat and a member of parliament. So what I'm going to talk about now is basically all the bits beyond the writing, because I really want to paint a picture of who this guy was, because his life beyond the writing is kind of forgotten, really.
Yeah.
And he was a big figure in lots of ways, and not just for his confusing rhyming Old English. So everything I'm going to talk about is really about everything else he did, and to appreciate the real Chaucer, because he had this most extraordinary life. So he was born in London, most likely in the early 1340s, probably in 1343. But we're not really sure, but around then. And the Chaucer family is also just extraordinary as well in its own way, and partly as an example of social mobility more than anything. So his great-grandfather was a tavern keeper. Mm-hmm. His grandfather was then a wine salesman, so you can kind of see the link. His father was then a
Tequila.
Was a bottle maker.
Yeah, he's going up the stream. Yeah.
Yes.
And his mother was a grape.
All the way back to sauce.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, and his mother was a grape. So his father John Chaucer then was a very important wine merchant, and got a royal appointment as part of that role, and so he owes a huge amount to taverns and the booze industry.
Love that.
And that
the
was
only
really...
real way to get ahead in England at the
Yeah,
time,
right?
Or currently.
And here's a weird thing that happened in his family history. So in 1324, it turns out his father, John Chaucer, was kidnapped by an aunt in the hope of marrying the boy to her daughter to try and keep the property that they owned as a family
Oh.
in Ipswich. So, but which basically tells you that by the time his father was a child, they're already quite a wealthy family, and they're all vying to keep the money
to marry their cousins.
Their cousins. That's the only way to keep your wealth.
Yep.
Agreed. And the aunt was then imprisoned and fined £250, which is about £200,000 now.
Oh,
wow,
God.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money, and there's just generally a lot going on there in that story.
So
that we
that,
probably
in fact, super backfired on her.
massively. And Chaucer's dad then married a guy called... A guy? No.
Well, I would be an interesting twist.
Yeah, he married someone called Agnes Copton, who inherited a whole bunch of properties, including 24 shops in London from her uncle.
24 shops. What kind of shops? Are we talking like a local Nissa type thing? Are we like corner shop, or are we talking like some really bougie?
Yeah, how many
Pradas
offies
on Regent Street kind of stuff? You know.
I think they were all Tescoe Expresses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ye old Tesco.
Ye olde
What's the
Tescoe
American
Expresses.
equivalent of Tesco Express? It's like CVS
Seven
Yeah.
or Target.
Yeah, CVS, really.
E.
It's great that we have to explain the joke. That really makes it funny.
No, everyone should come to England so they can experience Tesco Express on their own.
Other convenience stores are available. And when it comes to Chaucer's life, one of the big differences between him and his other contemporary writers that were around at the time, so there's a guy called William Langland, there's another guy who maybe Andy, you've come across, called Gawain Poet. No, okay, fine.
No, is he the reason the word poet exists?
Gawain
He is not.
Oh.
He is not.
I am taking Gawain Poet for my rap alias, though, if that's okay with everyone.
But the main difference between him and all these other dudes is that he had this like quite well-to-do family, and then he himself was like a bureaucrat, and so there's lots that we know about his life. There's loads of record keeping about Chaucer, and that's part of why he's become an object of historical fascination, and the other people like slightly less so. And so the first like Chaucer life records actually appeared during his life when he became a noblewoman's page. A noblewoman was the Countess of Ulster. That he got through his father's connections. And then I'll just go through, I won't go through everything he then did over the following like 20, 30 years.
Oats.
But
Brisk walk in the park.
basically, he's just had loads of adventures.
Yeah.
And I think this is just something that isn't really commonly covered in your English literature syllabus. It's just who this guy was who's writing this thing. So in 1359, during the early stages of the 100 Years' War, Edward III, who was the king at the time, invaded France, and Chaucer travelled with Lionel of Antwerp, who was the husband of the woman he was the page to. And then as part of that guy's sort of entourage, he was formed part of the English army. And the following year, he was captured at the siege of Rheims. And the king at the time, King Edward, then paid £16 for his ransom back from France. So he got captured, ransom back.
Wow.
And then from there, he seems to have travelled across France, Spain, and Flanders. He went on pilgrimage to the Santiago de Compostela. And then in 1366, he married a lady in waiting to the Queen. So he's very much like in. He's not
In the
nobility.
orbit.
Yeah, but he's still in high society.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
a hanger-on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like just a generally useful person and trusted person. Although a bit a level down from nobility. So he then studied law, and he became a member of the royal court of the king as a valet de chambre.
Valet de chambre, is that the guy that holds the pot for the king?
No, that's the guy that parks the car in the bedroom.
In the bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So it is actually, and I quote, a position which could entail a wide variety of tasks, unquote.
Oof, that is saucy.
Wink, wink.
And
Saucy Chaucy.
Saucy Chaucy. Damn you for getting to there first.
And his wife also received a pension from the court for employment as well. So she was in the mix as well, being useful as lady in waiting. And he was just travelling all over the place. So he went to Milan for an aristocrat's wedding, and then to France again as part of another military expedition. In 1373, he visited Genoa and Florence, where he encountered some of the most prominent Italian poets at the time and had formed close relationships with them and read all about how they were going about their work.
Did they rap battle?
They did. They rap battles.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely right. That was in Florence.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good.
That's right, in 1373.
Yeah.
And in 1377, he went on a secret mission to arrange a marriage between the future King Richard II and a French princess to try and end the 100 Years' War. But they couldn't negotiate the deal properly, and the war continued. Yeah. So he's
Man, he's really he's got his fingers in a lot of pies.
Yeah.
huge number of fingers, and
10 at least.
so I'll give a couple more. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and I think you sort of get the impression of what this guy's like. It's just the most extraordinary life, and the writing is which is so influential for English culture, is almost incidental compared
Yeah.
with everything else he's doing. So the next year, in 1378, Richard II then sent Chaucer as a secret envoy to Sir John Hawkwood, who was an English mercenary in Milan. And it's been speculated then that Hawkwood was the guy he based the character of the knight in Canterbury Tales, not the character of the knight from Canterbury Tales. So anyway, his life just went on like this. He was at the heart of political intrigue and just had adventure after adventure. And I absolutely won't go through everything. But then in 1390, so about 12 years later, he was then robbed and injured on one of these adventures.
Oh, no.
And then seems to have slowed down a bit after that, understandably.
Yeah.
And then in 1393, which is that the year?
That is the year. I was
Yeah.
waiting
Yeah,
because he was born.
here we
You
go.
said he was born in 1343, right?
That's right.
So he's 50.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a breakneck overview of his 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So 1393, he was then granted a pension by the king
So
for
that's
his
his second
service.
pension.
Ugh.
Oh, his wife's got
Double
a pension.
dipping.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh,
He's got,
okay.
this is
Rated
his exactly. So he's getting this official patronage from the king for all his service and literary achievements, and it was quite a generous one. And then he died on. That's the only thing that happened in the 1393, by the way.
What? Had he got a pension? That's
That's the whole year.
the complete pivot point for this year for 1393 at Chaucer is that he got a pension. Like,
I love it.
wow. Well,
Hey, look, I mentioned a thing that happened
Yeah,
in that year.
yes.
this is true.
by
You are
by the rules,
scot free.
you have succeeded.
So he then died on the 25th of October, 1400, probably from natural causes, though there's some speculation that he
Only
was-
7 years of pension.
Oh yeah, he didn't maximize that benefit.
that he might have been murdered after because his main patron, King Richard II, had died just before that, and so it's speculated that the successors gang might have murdered him amongst the various murders they were
As like
doing.
a
at the time.
loyalist to the former king or something.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Interesting.
Anyway, so there you have it. Just the most incredible life, Geoffrey Chaucer, and the writing was just like the least.
He also
Yeah.
did.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Have you guys read the Canterbury Tales?
I have.
Yeah. Do you have to read it as a child?
We did,
here?
yeah.
Yeah.
I did not read it.
Yeah.
I have not read it, and I will
And
not
I
read it.
and God damn it, I will not read it.
I will die on this hill.
It's very good once you kind of get into the rhythm of the
Yeah.
language. Yeah.
I did used to live in Canterbury, and the tales I have from there are
Not fit for print.
probably not fit for print. Yeah.
Amazing.
Cool. So, for my turn, busy Bulgarian boys, we're going to talk about the Ottoman Empire.
Ooh.
Now, we've
They've
not,
been on the periphery.
they've been on the periphery. We've never really focused on them, which is
Yeah.
alarming. And I did not know this before researching this, but they were a big empire.
Yeah.
Serious players in the NFL for empires. And they lasted a long time. One of the longest lasting empires, in fact.
Yeah.
And they lasted from about 1299. And when do you think they kind of finished up? Ish.
The Ottomans,
Yeah.
like 1920.
Yeah.
1922. Okay,
Yeah.
boring quiz then.
Hold on, let me say something extravagant so that you can,
I thought you were
going
going
to
to. Okay, no, fine. Just me that didn't really know that then. They spanned Europe, Asia, Africa, and 600 years of history. Incredible feat. And it was started by one chap called Osman the First, and he called himself Sultan. And he raided and expanded his territories against the Byzantines, which were the other big players around this time in 1299. It's very, very fuzzy, of course, when we go back that far, so we don't know what's really true and what's not true about Osman. But suffice to say that Ozzy basically just rolled over the people around him, took over Brussa, and that's where his tomb still is. So Osman, very successful dude. And then by the 1300s, after picking up momentum, early 1300s, they started professionalizing the army. So rather than local militias just banding together for a war and then collapsing back into sort of farming and peacetime again, they came up with this idea, and they called them the Janissaries.
Yeah.
And so the Janissaries were a really interesting class of sort of military people, whereby they sort of gathered Christians of the conquered peoples in the areas that they took over, and they made this formed military units and this formed army, and they're extremely loyal, and it was the first full-time army in Europe.
So all Janissaries were Christians?
All the Janissaries, I think, were Christian, yeah, from
Fascinating.
what I can see. And the Ottomans made strategic alliances with the Byzantines as well, but they swiftly stabbed them in the back whenever it was convenient to them, and they expanded into their areas. And the Byzantine emperor was like, please stop for the sake of things. They're like, okay, cool, and then they didn't stop.
Classic.
So by the third sultan, which was a chap by the name of Bayezid, they basically had rolled over most of modern day Turkey, but stalled at Constantinople, and they doubled down, just pillaging and raiding and expanding around the areas, and they expanded into the Balkans, took over Macedonia rather swiftly, and then Bulgaria was next on the list. And
then they saw swarms of busy boys. And by 1382, they tried to force an annexation. They said, hey, look, just be a vassal state of ours and you'll be fine. Yeah.
We'll leave you alone.
To Bulgaria.
Yeah. And they said no, and so lots of scrapping ensued. They also went on to Serbia, and it's just a domino effect of just all these places just falling to the Ottomans that were just, this Janissary army just able to just take on anything that came up.
Except Bulgaria. They were holding out.
Except for Bulgaria at the moment. So parts of Bulgaria. But after expanding so far, the Karaman Emperor in the south were then threatening the borders of the Ottoman Empire. So they had to go back there and back and forth, kind of fighting them, and go back to the front lines again in the northwest. So there's an unstable peace, and they went back to Constantinople to siege it. So 1393, the year in question, this saw the siege then and the conquering in Bulgaria of Tarnovo.
Yeah.
Which is the name of the place.
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
Sounds totally reasonable.
Its modern day name is much easier to pronounce. It's Veliko Tarnovo. So that's fine. 17th of July was when the siege happened, so 3 months. And the Christian patriarch, which we'll talk about a bit, called Euthmius, he led the defense. Euthmius the Pious.
That's nice.
Not actually his name, but
well,
I
it
think
should have been.
Missed a trick. So he's a great guy. He's such a great guy, they made him a saint. Regarded as one of the most important Bulgarian figures of the Middle Ages. He was a big proponent of something I'd never heard of before called hechegasm.
Excuse me?
Come again?
Hechegasm was a sort of an Orthodox Christian belief of enlightenment through what was called uninterrupted prayer to Jesus. So it's a continual praying.
Huh.
And they did this in a really interesting way.
I think just carry on, but
yeah.
No,
interesting.
Uninterrupted prayer. Yeah, except interrupted by the Ottomans, and that's why.
And by the hechegasm at the end of it.
The hechegasm. But how they
Is that not what you're saying?
I've never prayed that hard in my life.
Well, I'm going to teach you how to do it. So join along with me.
Oh yeah,
so what you need
we'll
to
film
do
it for the Patreon.
Is you bend your head down.
Okay.
Focus on your chest, and through rhythmic prayer and breathing, they kind of go into this altered psychological state.
Okay.
Where they're sort of controlling their breathing and just
God.
Exactly like that. And then the hechegasm at the end is apparently really intense. So
wow.
Yeah, go for it. He also set up schools for languages, and he wanted to increase literacy, and it was just center points of culture in Bulgaria. They passed down, I guess, the recipes for borsches and stews and stuff as well. I don't know. Anyway, his uninterrupted prayer was very much interrupted by the Ottomans.
Yeah.
But he staged a ferocious defense there for 3 months. So it was really hand-to-hand combat, street to street.
Oh, geez.
Keeping the Ottomans at bay. And he was corralling all the logistics and reinforcements and stuff.
Whilst constantly in rhythmic prayer.
Constantly in rhythmic prayer. And allegedly, I mean, it's hard to know the passage of time, but allegedly the only reason the city fell was due to treason by one of the non-Christian neighborhoods.
Boo.
Yeah, and so these non-Christian neighborhoods had some key to a gate or supported the troops outside in some way and let them in. Whether that's true or not, it's unknown. There was a contemporary event. It's transcribed. It describes it as follow: that there was a great Muslim invasion happened, and total destruction was done with this city and its surroundings. Churches were turned into mosques, priests were expelled, and substituted with, quote, teachers of shamelessness.
Oh, I've tried to be a teacher of shamelessness, but I didn't pass my qualifications. Yeah.
Apparently 110 noted citizens of Tarnovo were killed. but Patriarch Euthamius was reprieved and sent into exile into Macedonia, where he lived out the rest of his life until about 1402, sometime around
I mean,
there.
quite frankly, that's a pretty good ending for him, right?
Yeah,
he could have got.
He could have got big time, but he didn't get got unless he got by God when he was canonized.
Oh,
so he got in the best way.
Got by God.
Got by God. Anyway, after the fall of this town in Bulgaria, the rest of Bulgaria did fall about 3 years later and was under the Ottoman rule. But there was still resistant pockets and anti-Ottoman sentiment until about the 17th century, including large-scale uprisings, 2 of them at least, but to no avail, and they remained inside the fold of the Ottoman Empire until the 19th century.
All right, I am going to talk today about France, or France, as it is pronounced.
Messy.
Yes. And I'm going to talk about the curious and somewhat tragic King Charles VI of France. He was king from 1380 until his death in 1422, having come to the throne when he was just 11.
Oh.
King Charles VI was the son of Charles V,
Yep.
who had been a Will, I don't want to trigger you.
Okay.
Who had been a good king, taking back a lot of English possessions in France.
So he was good from the French perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he was conquering bits of England
He was.
that lie in modern day France.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. And he left a very healthy budget surplus. But, which we love.
We love finances in this podcast.
We love
yeah.
finances. But because Charles VI is just 11 when his father dies, he's placed under a regency.
And he spent it all on like Pokemon Go cards.
Yeah,
or whatever,
exactly.
yeah.
He was really into Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, the regency is run by his 4 uncles, who are all, of course, jostling for power in their own right. And they spectacularly mismanage the country and run down the surplus, and just everything is in tatters because they're all basically powerful dukes. So they want primacy for their region.
Yeah, they're duking it out.
Hey, maybe that's where it comes from. But when Charles the Sixth, I'll stop saying the Sixth. When Charles is 20, he puts an end to the regency.
Sorry, which Charles?
It's this. Hold on, let me check. It's the 6th. He ends the regency. He brings back his father's competent advisors. He restores respect to the throne, and people love him, and they call him very creatively Charles the Beloved.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's the end of the story. Nope. Unfortunately, it does start to go downhill from there because Charles goes through many, many periods of mental instability. For instance, there was a time when he couldn't remember his name and he didn't know he was king. He didn't recognize his wife, Queen Isabeau, when she came to visit. Once he claimed he was St. George. He would run down the hallways of the palace howling like a wolf. He refused to bathe or change his clothes for 5 months.
No.
Sorry, Aunt, that's triggering for you. I know.
I mean, it is because I'm on month 6 now, and it's totally fine.
Yeah,
the body has natural oils. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in the same room as you. Finally, he thought he was made of glass, and he tried to protect himself from breaking by sewing iron rods into his clothes so that if somebody bumped into him, he wouldn't break.
I mean,
Was he made of glass?
He was, yeah. So that one was actually perfectly normal.
I mean, it's not very funny because this guy was obviously.
Oh yeah,
you know,
he was like incredibly unwell, and
poor guy.
I think historians have kind of retroactively diagnosed him with schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And it's possible that his mother also had it, but he had these periods of total lucidity and then periods of episodes. And since this is the 14th century, there's just not a good way to treat it. But one thing that his court tried to do was surround him with a festive atmosphere and protect him from the rigor of governing as much as possible.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So almost sheltering him.
Yeah, exactly.
When you say festive, is it constantly Christmas there, or is it just like?
It's constantly parties.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I'm going to, in fact, talk about one party that happened in 1393. His court would just be devising all of these really elaborate schemes to keep him distracted and happy. Like having the women dress in increasingly ornate dresses and hairstyles,
Cool.
which is just objectively hilarious. I think we can all agree. But one of these possible distractions came about in January 1393, when Queen Isabeau threw a masquerade ball to honor the remarriage of one of her ladies-in-waiting. And at this time,
she wasn't waiting any longer.
She was tired of waiting.
I'm so sorry. That's a terrible joke. I apologize. Let's just cut that one out.
No, I think it's great. I loved it. So at this time, when a widow got remarried, so that her lady-in-waiting was a widow, and when widows got remarried, people celebrated with, quote, mockery and tomfoolery, and all sorts of license, disguises, and disorders.
Right.
So one of Charles's noblemen, a man named
here we go,
Hugues de Guizet. Nailed it. Who was
Hugues.
Well, it looks like Huguet de Guizet.
You're so American.
Huguet was known for his...
This is going to be so upsetting for our 7 French
I'm
listeners.
sorry. I honestly, though, the French listeners would be more upset if I tried to pronounce it right again. Yeah. Hugh, let's call him, was known for his outrageous schemes, and he suggested that 6 men, including King Charles, dress up as wild men of the woods and perform a dance at the ball. Charles was all in. He loved it. They made costumes of linen and flax, so they seemed really hairy and shaggy. The costumes were sewn to the men's bodies for reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
And they wore masks. It's possible that they were chained together at the leg. And nothing could go wrong here.
Look, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but this is a fire hazard.
Well, do you remember what my 3 words were?
Yes.
This party's lit.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah. They wore masks. Not everyone knew the king was one of the dancers. They were dancing in this like diabolical frenzy and just like cavorting all over the place. They were screaming obscenities at the audience and just being wild men, and everybody loved it. Now, because this was such a fire hazard, someone had very smartly insisted that any lit torches needed to stay against the wall and not come anywhere near the dancers. So they barred people from holding torches. However, Charles's brother, the Duke of Orleans, arrived late and was drunk, and he barged into the hall carrying a torch, which he put down near one of the dancers to see his face and try to guess his identity. A spark fell off the torch and lit the man on fire. God. And then, of course, it's just pandemonium. The queen faints. Charles just happened to be standing a little bit removed from the other dancers, and his aunt, who was only 15 years old, throws the long train of her dress over him to protect him from the sparks, and that's what ends up saving him. He doesn't catch fire. Several of the other dancers do. Everyone's screaming, trying to rescue them. One of the dancers jumps in a big vat of wine, and a couple others died. Charles survives. Hugh, the guy whose idea it had been, died of his burns 2 days later. Oof. But according to one of the chronicles of the event, he had a reputation for treating low-born servants like animals. So the nobles rejoiced at his agonizing death.
No.
Wow,
this is so grim.
I know.
So grim.
It is just like it is so tragic.
Yes.
I mean, already this king had enough to deal with in his life, and what was supposed to be like a fun and harmless thing ends up being this horrific event.
They're so callous as well in their response.
Yes, I know. It's like
also like that guy that's renowned for doing mischievous things or whatever.
Yeah.
Like as far as mischievous things go, dancing around as like a fire hazard is not like
yeah.
great.
Oh no, that was for,
Like, do they, like,
in
rub themselves
1393
in, like-
super mischievous.
Like were they rubbed in candle wax or something? You said flax, right?
Flax and linen, and then I think there must have been like a resin or something that was
Gosh.
keeping the flax so they're like extremely flammable,
Yeah.
and they couldn't get out of the costumes.
Which
'cause they
is
were
the worst
sewn
thing
into
about being a
them.
wild man in the woods is how flammable
Yeah,
you have
it's
to
a
dress.
big fire
Yeah.
hazard, yeah. And so in the aftermath, most people put the blame on the Duke who had come in with the torch.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are conspiracy theories that it was an attempt to kill the king.
Yeah.
And that the Duke was a sorcerer, obviously.
I like that one the best.
Yeah. But it came to be known as the Bal des Ardents, or like the ball of the flaming men, but also ardent, the word, like if you're an ardent admirer of something, that's what it comes from, because you have this like burning desire of love for something.
Be a wild man.
Yeah, it's the same, like not from this ball, but from that, that French word.
Okay, from that French word. I thought like that's where the word ardent comes
no, there's no Chaucers here. Nobody invented any words.
Yeah.
But it was basically the beginning of the end for Charles, and the people, instead of being really sympathetic to what had just happened to him, they saw the whole thing as an extravagance and bad judgment on the part of the king, who shouldn't have been organizing.
Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is like, God, add insult to injury, right? They could have been a little sympathetic. But anyway, the attacks of like mental unwellness increased throughout the 1390s. But again, his reign lasted until 1422. Even though at this point he's mostly just a ceremonial king.
Yeah, he must have been very harmless. Where like, the actual governance of it was controlled by.
And there's all sorts of
the Jaffars of the court.
Yes, exactly. Well, and the Jasmines, because his queen sort of controlled the regency for the most part, and then of course there are all these rumors that she's sleeping with his brother and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And also, what's the bird called?
Iago.
Iago.
Yeah.
The Iagos of the court.
Oh yeah, did I not mention Iago? Iago was in the ballroom.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really fascinating. There's a lot of big history that comes in his reign, like Agincourt is during the reign of Charles VI, but he is not really the king.
Really,
and then of course Joan of Arc comes later, and we'll get to those people at some point. But yeah, that's just a little slice of life of Charles VI, who was dealt a pretty bad hand.
Had I told this story, it would have been 98% Agincourt.
Exactly.
Well, Agincourt didn't happen in 1393.
No, but I would have jumped off onto his life and then pivoted.
So there's Fiery Ball and then the war.
yeah, exactly. Well, I apologize, but I wanted to save Agincourt for you to do.
Actually, I'd been pretty pissed.
Yeah.
Had you done it? That's really interesting.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's interesting, but super grim.
I know, it's grim.
Poor king.
Poor king.
I'd feel bad for
the
king.
French. Yeah.
Or for the French. Yeah.
It turns out the 14th century fraught with peril.
Yeah.
Unless you were Geoffrey Chaucer and could just,
do what you wanted.
Schmooze your way into the hearts and minds of the
several
people.
times and escaped and wrote a bunch of stuff I'll never read. I mean,
wrote a bunch of stuff you can't read, in fact.
Look, literacy is overrated.
Just like bathing. Okay, well, thanks for joining us. That's everything you'd ever need to know about the year 1393.
And before we go on, I need to once more humiliate myself.
You're so contrite.
And flagellate myself in front of the masses.
Yeah, on your knees.
I owe an apology. Because 2 weeks ago, in our episode featuring the war that I talked about
in 1881,
South Africa, I called it the Boer War.
Okay,
right,
and it's actually pronounced Boer.
Oh,
so
right, yes.
Our South African fans have been openly assaulting me on the street.
Yeah, by what they've been hurling things at you.
They have been hurling things at me.
Yeah.
And I am very sorry. I mean, I deserve it. I do deserve it.
Yeah.
And so they don't need to apologize for, but I do. So the Boer War.
Okay.
And I've done that classic thing of just mispronouncing something and not bothering my arse to learn anything.
There we go.
So there you go. But anyway, moving swiftly on. I'll never be wrong again.
That's you heard it here first, everyone. He'll never be wrong again.
I'm gonna stand up.
That's quite a positive outcome, actually, from this, isn't it? That you'll never be wrong again.
Eternal correctness.
Yeah.
I will be infallible from this day forward. Until my last.
In the extreme hypothetical that you're not, what happens to you?
Oh, death.
Okay, great.
Just straight up death.
Good.
Just.
Yeah. Unrelatedly, we'll be looking for a new co-host.
Anyway, shall we go find our new year?
Yes, let's.
Will you please boot up the random number generator?
Absolutely. And as a reminder, we've set the random number generator to choose a year between 1000 BCE and 2000 CE. And the year for next week is 1505.
Ooh.
It's like halfway between 1000 and 2000. Actually, never mind. I take that back.
That's halfway between 1500 and 1510.
Wow, when you think about it like that, that's amazing.
That's crazy. I
Why did
can't
my
believe
brain
we
think
got
that?
that.
Yeah.
That's going to be good. Loads of stuff happening.
Shakespeare?
Gotta
Little
be.
too early.
Too early.
Little too
I mean, he's not
early.
alive.
We're getting close. We're really
The
getting
Ottomans.
close. The Ottomans
They're
are
still
still
around.
in the mix.
They're now a big go-to for us.
They really are. They're,
Yeah.
they're catch-all. So it'd be the Romans for the first bit, and then we've got the Ottomans.
Well,
for
yeah,
600
it's
years
like
here.
the Chinese, and then the Romans, and then the Ottomans,
Oh, yeah,
and
we've got
then
everything
America.
covered. This is easy.
History's
so easy.
so
History's
easy.
so easy.
History's a laugh.
Great, 1505. We'll see you next
Look
week.
forward to it.
Bye.